What you're about to experience are my opinions and truths. I'm suggesting these possibilities for you to consider, enabling you to come up with your own conclusions. Ladies and gentlemen, code breakers around the world, wherever you may be, my name is Logan. I'm going to be your tour guide for this presentation on the topic of Inanna, Ishtar, Aphrodite, Venus, the Queen of Heaven. Which one do you reference Inanna by? The earliest that I could find to go by as a name or title is Inanna. And we don't even have a spelling for that. We have cuneiform. But we're going to break this down as best as we can. So get strapped in, get settled in, put on a pair of headphones, block out the outside world. I promise you this one will leave you esoterically satisfied. I promise you. So it's fascinating how the tarot fits into all this. This is card number 8 in the major arcana, the strength card. Is this Inanna? Is this Venus? Is this Aphrodite on that card holding the lion's jaw? Well, it is card number 8, and we know that the star of Inanna or Ishtar was an 8-pointed star. That's its most common symbol. It's also the 5, but I think that's due to the pentagram that it makes through its orbital period. But personally, I'm convinced that the strength card in the major arcana is Inanna, aka Aphrodite, aka Venus. Why would the lion be a part of Inanna? Well, you see, if we just reference it as Aphrodite or Venus, she is the star that tells you the sun is coming. And there is only one lion in the Zodiac, and that's tied to Leo, and Leo's ruled by the sun. So you have Venus heralding the sun, which is the lion. And of course, Venus rules Taurus, the bull, and Libra, the scales. So it's very interesting, and the connections, I think, are here. These are standard for me anyway now. Maybe you already knew this, but the 8-pointed star. So let's get into Inanna. And again, you can't really go as a forensics decoder. You really can't break down the cuneiform. I do know that this symbol right here kind of means, a deity, God. And then it has like this letter M with a line through it. All we can do is trace it to letters that we can use as a code breaker. But I think you can see I have it highlighted there. It says her most prominent symbols include the lion and the 8-pointed star. There's the lion right there. And again, the lion of the Zodiac is tied to Leo, tied to the monad, tied to the sun. And Venus is the star that heralds the sun, telling you the sun's coming. And this is why I feel that this is the Christ and this is Jesus. Because Jesus clearly says in Revelation 22 verses 16, I am the bright morning star. You can't get any more clearer than that. Christ is a title, meaning anointed, which illuminates Jesus is not that. Jesus was a man. From a cosmology perspective, I feel Jesus is tied to Venus, as is Mercury, and you're going to see that as we go through this. So here are the symbols, the two prominent ones for the sun. Leo in astrology, ruling the 5th house. Remember, 5 is your ego. It's the Hierophant in the tarot. The 5th house of astrology is your sex. The 5th house is your manifestations. The 5th house is Leo the lion, and the lion works in a pride, and pride is another word for ego. And then you have Taurus the bull. This is where you're going to get the calf worship in the Bible. I'm going to cover that, as well as Libra the scales. Venus has 2 signs. The sun only has 1. Venus or Inanna has 2. And we're going to cover that. Now, the 8-pointed star is very fascinating. Here it is over the monad because of the fact that Inanna is the 8-pointed star. I covered this in an exclusive presentation. You can find it on the Patreon. We're getting close to 200 videos that you can't find here on YouTube. Exclusively on the Patreon. This one was a humdinger extraordinaire 8-pointed star. So if you want to get really detailed with this, head over to the Patreon and check that one out. It's badass, this presentation. But let's get into some numerology. We'll get into some forensics now. And I'm going to go to the Phoenician. Phoenician is the first language where we actually have an alphabet where we can actually place a value next to the letter. Again, the cuneiform, I can't really do it here. I tried. But here I can. So here is the Phoenician spelling of Venus. This is going to be Astarte or something like that. I'm not proficient in Hebrew, so I probably butchered that. But it comes from Ishtar and Inanna. And the value we get in Hebrew / Phoenician, because, of course, Phoenician has 22 letters. That's where Hebrew came from. Phoenician predates the Hebrew. But the values are the same. And we get 86. And this is mind-blowing. Now we're going to go right into chemistry and astronomy. Because 86 is tied to Radon. And Venus, the orbital period of Venus is 224. And one of the radioisotopes of the 86th element is Radon 224. And I don't know if you caught it already, but Venus is the star, the son of the morning, right? This is where you get Lucifer from. This is where you get the bright morning star, where Jesus claims that he is in Revelation. So we have a connection between Lucifer, the bright morning star. There's tons of connections between Lucifer and Venus. And there's obvious connections of Jesus being tied to the bright morning star. And Ra is the sun, and dawn is a word for the dawn. And dawn is when you get the morning sky. You see this. Venus appears in the morning sky just before dawn, signaling that sunrise is near. This is why the planet was historically called the morning star, as it was a bright beacon announcing the coming daylight. Ra, dawn. I'm telling you, folks, these are the connections that we can easily look to for massive clues on how this world works. Again, we're just starting with the Phoenician word for Inanna. It also goes by Noga in Hebrew. Venus does Noga. But I think this is a humdinger, Ra, dawn, and dawn. And it's got the word Ra in it, and Ra means the sun, right? Venus being a star. And this radon comes from radium. See, it says radium emits a radioactive substance called radon. This is a radioactive isotope, 224. They're all radioactive. Radon does not have any stable isotopes. They're all radioactive. That's why the symbol chosen by the Royal Society of Chemistry is, you better not go near there, radiation. All from simply observing a word going all the way back to the Phoenician language, predating the Hebrew. Aleph, Shin, Ta, Resh, Ta. Those are the 5 letters. It's 5 letters. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. What is this reduced down to? The root of 86 is 5. 5. See the Ra there and the Ra there. Ra, dawn. This would be the sun. This would be Venus, telling you that the sun's coming. This is the dawn time. Some of you wake up every day and you see this. The sun's coming. Well, Venus may just be in the sky telling you that Ra's coming. This is fascinating stuff right here. But let's keep going. Here's where we get the connections to the number 5. Remember, 86, the root of that is the 5. 8 plus 6 is 14. 1 plus 4 is 5. There are 5 letters here. Big connections. Venus, through its orbital period, makes the 5-pointed pentagram. And how we can take this heart is you could just place them right here. They fit right all over that. 5 of them. I don't think this is stretching anything. I think this is absolute. What do you think? Then it makes that pentagram in the middle, the 5-pointed. The Pentagon in the United States. 5 is your ego. 5 is your sex. 5 is how you manifest. 5 is tied to the house of Leo. Leo is the lion, and that's one of Inanna's pets. It's very, very fascinating, and we covered this during the Groundhog Day Decoded, how it's tied to the Jesus character and the Tin Man and the Wizard of Oz, and even through the Vedic system of the heart chakra, the Anahata, and how that's tied through Sanskrit numerology, how it's tied to Yam. This is the symbol of Yam. Yam has a value of 40. 173 is the 40th prime. The square root of 3, which is tied to this Vesica Piscis, is 1.73. You're going to see this. We're going to be showing this in just a little bit. I'm going to be bringing in the tree of life and the flower of life. It's going to blow your mind. The Ichthys, the Christ, the Jesus character, tied to Venus, tied to love, compassion. Are you seeing this? And we know how big this is. This is just all big stuff here. So now we get into the tree of life. And I have a figure here because I want to be clear. This is not going to line up with the standard tree of life because they're going to have Hod over here on the right. But how we observe this tree is if you're facing it with your back. So the right-hand path is going to be tied to Venus, which is this right here. This is Venus. And the left-hand path is Mercury, Hod, right here. You have the left-hand path, which is cold. You have the right-hand path, which is hot. You notice that the symbols of Venus and Mercury are almost identical. It's just that Mercury has that crescent moon. You could say there are little devil horns there. It's fascinating. But of course, this is what makes up the Philosopher's Stone, not Venus. So it's very, very interesting to play around with this. And there's the crescent moon. So even though this seemingly middle path here, which to me is very debatable, the big standouts are this diamond shape and Malkuth at the bottom. And could this be the prison? Since this is a system, a team. We have Tifereth, the sun, we have Yesod, the moon, and then we have Mercury and Venus, or Inanna, on the left and right hand paths. Using the tree of life now. And I put Mercury 203. This is a radioisotope. It's not one of its stable isotopes. So I'm just playing around with these isotopes. But again, the reason why I have the radon 224 is because the orbital period of Venus is 224. This is the right-hand path. Just do the right thing. That's why you say that. Just do the right thing. The right-hand path is the path of shalom. The left-hand path, sin. Maybe this is why the devil horns are there. I know it's the crescent moon. The moon is traditionally known when the lunatics come out. The moon is when most people sin. The moon god is the god of sin. This is tied to baptism. We covered that in the baptism decoded. And this is why I kind of postulate whether or not Jesus is tied to Mercury. Came during the age of Pisces. Pisces is across from Virgo, and Virgo's ruled by Mercury. But anyway, there's Malkuth. There's the kingdom. Tellurium. 52 is tied to prison planet. Could these four Sephiroths be keeping us in a loop? Venus and Mercury, the two closest planets. Then the sun and the moon, and then you have Malkuth. And we know that tellurium means earth. It comes from the Latin word tellus. So I already know alchemically tellurium is tied to Malkuth. That's a dead giveaway. So the question is here is, we know that Jesus claims to be the bright morning star, and we know that radon, which is radioactive, which is dangerous. But we're talking about cosmology and alchemy, so it can go in a million different ways. And we know that Christ is a title, not a name, like Jesus is Jesus is a name. And we know that this is Zeus, Jesus. So Jesus being Venus sits here, right below Jesus. This Sephiroth is going to be Zeus. And then we have Jesus coming as a messenger, Mercury being a messenger. Jesus telling you that he's going to take your sins away, and that's all tied to baptism, and that's tied to the moon, because the moon is all about water, and the Passover has to be during a full moon. So I feel personally, I'm pretty comfortable saying that Jesus is tied to Mercury and Venus. They both, again, have the circle with the cross, the spirit, to the cross. And again, if Jesus wasn't baptizing and telling you to keep doing that, and if there was no baptism and there was no water, I wouldn't be saying this. We would leave this out. But because Jesus was a messenger, because he came during the age of Pisces, which is across from Virgo, and Virgo's ruled by Mercury, and Jesus is said to take your sins away, tied to John the Baptist, and this is all about the moon, and the moon traditionally runs the tides and water. And is it possible that Jesus is Mercury and Venus? See, I say yes. I say that is the case. But let's keep going. So again, Zeus is right here at that Sephiroth, right above Venus, in the right-hand path. And then over here in the left-hand path, we have Mars, in this Sephiroth, and then we have Saturn Kronos in Bina, traditionally now. And then Chokmah and Keter are going to be debatable. The Golden Dawn has Neptune here and Uranus there. I'm going to talk about those. But these are in line. This is the left-hand path. This is traditionally the path of sin. You have Saturn, Satan, right? Mars, war, conflict, and then the trickster of Mercury. I mean, it kind of spells out the path of sin, the left-hand path. And then the moon. I would say the moon is, and I know it's got the middle pillar here, but I'd say the moon is the left-hand path, the reflecting. And then over here, the sun, Helios, the Titan, the Olympian, Zeus, all here on the right-hand path, and Venus. I mean, it makes much more sense when you look at it like this. To me, it does. What do you think? All it's going to come down to what you end up adopting as your truth. But I think these are really big deals here. But see, this is where it gets interesting, and this is why I don't follow theology. I like studying it, but I don't follow it. I'm not into worship and prayer and doing all that stuff. I don't do the rituals. I think they're silly, personally. But clearly in Revelation, this is Jesus talking to the church of Laodicea. Talked about this a million times now. Jesus visiting the church of Laodicea, and this is what he says, I know your works. You're neither cold nor hot. But this is the big thing that I don't hear any pastors talking about or interpreting this, but I already know what this means. See, if Jesus was your Savior, he would offer you one way. But he doesn't. He wants you to pick cold or hot. You're either with me or against me. You're either going to be hot, zestos in Greek, or psychros, cold. That's what those words are in Greek. This is the English version, of course, but the New Testament was written in Greek. And the Greek scriptures is zestos, hot, psychros or psychros, cold. And Jesus wants you to pick one. Why would he want you to choose when there should just be one path? Because clearly you can't have one pillar without the other. That's a dead giveaway now. So there's something up to this stuff. This is why this stuff, to me, there's something fishy. There's Trojan horses in here. I like the aspect of Jesus being loving and caring and compassionate. That's all great. I feel like we should be living our lives like that. I do my best to live my life like that. But when it comes to doing the vampirism and the cannibalism, eating the wafers, drinking the blood, wearing all these funny costumes, doing all these rituals and these hand signals, no, that's where I draw the line. I don't do any of that stuff. I think that's unnecessary. These rituals, to me, are dead giveaways of something. There's booby traps here. Fishy stuff going on. For me, anyway. So then we bring it into the flower of life. This makes it much easier. And again, I personally think these are not set in stone. I think that it can be rearranged. But clearly, ladies and gentlemen, when you put the Vesica Piscis over these, well, it becomes very clear. And now you literally have the potential of this being the overlord of the prison. And maybe keeping us here in this lower region. Where, you could put the head there, the foot there, the arms and legs. This is the cross is right there, and you can't miss the cross. That's why, to me, the cross will get you reincarnated faster than any other symbol. Super powerful, of course. That's why people swear by it. But you'll never catch me wear one. The cross is right there. Left-hand path, right-hand path. And you literally have this loop here, the sun, the moon, Mercury, Venus. To me, this is a dead giveaway. And here's what it looks like traditionally from an alchemical perspective. Moving away from the raw dawn, right? But now we get into the traditional alchemical elements that represent each planet or celestial body. And we know that traditionally Venus or Inanna is copper. And we know that the sun is gold or aurum. And then over here on the left-hand path, we have Mercury, its most abundant isotope, 202. And this is even debatable because selenium, which comes from the Greek word selene, which means the moon, has that isotope number 80. And I want to be clear that the words tree of life in Hebrew, the numerology, they equal the number 80. I would suggest you go fact check that. Go plug it into the calculator. Tree of life equals 80. So the tree of life gets the nod to the left-hand path. If we're going to use selenium as the alchemical element to represent the moon, we could easily take silver here, put silver here, and you'd have quicksilver with Mercury. Mercury being tied to silver. That also is going to fit in the left-hand path. Being on the silver screen, that's also going to fit here. But I feel that this encapsulates perhaps the soul trap theory and the prison and all that kind of stuff. Mercury and Venus and the sun and the moon. And again, you look above and you have Mars on the left-hand path and Zeus on the right. It's very, very fascinating. There's a song by Frank Sinatra, Fly Me to the Moon. And in those verses, he talks about Jupiter and Mars. There's no other planets other than the moon in there in that song lyric, but he has Jupiter and Mars. Why? And they fit here in the upper echelon in the next tier above what seemingly is this loop. Perhaps keeping us stuck here because of playing out this hot and cold game of the rope-a-dope. So let's add these up. Let's add up the protons to get more confirmations. I'm going to take the 79 and 29 from gold and copper, and I'm going to take the 80 and 34. These are the protons now of mercury and selenium. We're going to add them up, and we get 222. Get out your calculators. I know you're going to fact check this. I would definitely encourage you to fact check it to make sure I get it right. It's 222. Now, where do we go from here? Now, there is an isotope 222 of raw dawn, but that's an isotope. I want to connect it to a proton. So the only thing I could do is do another calculation here. And this is about deducing, because there is only 118 known elements that we have available to us. There may be more, but this is all science tells us we have. The OG, the Oganesson, is the last element of the periodic table. And what's fascinating is the word Tartarus equals 118 in Greek numerology. The word Christos is 118. And why is Christos and Tartarus, the prison, have the same numerology? Is this the prison? Well, we're made up of these minerals. Your body needs 60 minerals every day to function correctly. So I know that this is a big thing in the world of forensics decoding. So because I have a 222 outcome for all four protons of these four elements, I have to take that 118 because it's the last known element, and I'm going to subtract it against that 222, and we're looking to get to 118 or below. Well, this was easy. We get 104. See, this is very magical because the 104th element, there it is Rutherfordium. The 104th element, being Rutherfordium, ties right to the numerology of these two big words in Greek. The first one is where Jesus is talking to the thief on his right when he's being crucified, and he says to the thief, "Today you will be with me in paradise." Paradisios is the word in Greek, and in the modern Greek for Poseidon, To match the modern Greek of paradise, it's exactly the same numerical output, 104. So, ladies and gentlemen, this is a big deal. I feel that these two anchors forming the left and right hand paths on this tree of life, with the sun and the moon and the earth right here, and this forming a cross. Clearly that's a cross. No doubt about it. But the big takeaway is the head and the heart and the two arms that would go across. Venus and Mercury having the spirit into matter, the circle and the cross. And Venus is the one that heralds the sun to tell you that it's coming. And Mercury has the crescent moon. These are humdingers. And I have no doubt that this is exactly what it's telling us. That they lead to this 104th element, Rutherfordium, which leads to the paradise and the recycling process. I have no doubt that this is what the code was here to say. And to give you even further icing on the cake here, is that Rutherfordium sits in this fourth category. And these are big ones. It's Rutherfordium, it's Hafnium. This is the Shem, this is the 72 angels and demons. 40 is tied to Sheol and Gehenna in numerology through Greek and Hebrew. This is Zirconium, which means recycling. And then you have the big one, which is Titanium, and these are the Titans, the sons and daughters of Earth. So if you really look at this, that Titanium and the Titans, which is tied to the word recycle, there are 22 letters in the Hebrew alphabet, there are 22 letters in the Phoenician alphabet, and that's how we got started on this whole presentation, was decoding Inanna, Ishtar, Aphrodite, Venus through the Phoenician and into the Hebrew. And this 22, ladies and gentlemen, is in the same row as that 104 where you have paradise. So is this kind of the booby trap to get you recycled? See, I say yes. And on top of that, Rutherfordium has this isotope 265, and it's exactly one of the measurements of the vesica piscis. Yeah, as fate would have it. And that right there is this right there. Going across. These are where the arms would be on the cross. Jesus putting his arms out on the left and right hand side. The left and right hand path of that Roman cross is exactly these numbers, folks. This is how you do the forensics. This is how you code break. And Rutherfordium, Ernest Rutherford, was the guy who was credited for the proton, which is light. Light slowed down into physical matter where we become human beings. The Titans. Here's the paradise. And here are the Titans in the same row. And now you can see the connections and how much merit these things have. And now you go back here and again, and these calculations are legit. Because we're not trying to fit anything here. All we do is chase it, connect it, and boy, does this really stand out. That this 104th element found from the 222, adding up the protons of all four of these elements, making up the right and left hand path of the sun, moon, Mercury, and Venus, which lead to the paradise, which leads to the domain of Poseidon, because Poseidon's the god of earth, clearly. And then it goes into the vesica piscis by way of the measurement of it, because this element has that 265. And it's right there. Over the flower of life, there's the vesica piscis with these two circles intertwined. Remember, folks, this is the lunar and solar eclipses. That's what the vesica piscis is, lunar and solar eclipses. And there's the sun and the moon encapsulating itself with Venus and Mercury, which obviously are spirit into matter. The circle is spirit, the cross is matter. This is the moon. The Venus star heralds the sun. I know this to be a fact in my world, but what do you think? These are really big deals here. So we're getting to the tail end of this, and I want to talk about some astronomy / astrology now. And when you really look at this and put it into perspective, it's kind of mind-blowing that one half of the zodiac is ruled by the sun, Mercury, Venus, and the moon. Taurus and Libra are ruled by Inanna, Venus, Aphrodite. Gemini and Virgo are ruled by Mercury. And then Cancer's ruled by the moon, and then Leo's ruled by the sun. Why does Venus and Mercury get 2 signs apiece? I didn't do it this way. But they do. And then when you go to the bottom half, traditionally, before Neptune and Uranus were discovered in the 1800s, it was Mars, Zeus, and Kronos. You see how profound this is? Traditionally, you have Mars in Aries and Mars in Scorpio. Pluto wasn't discovered then. You had Zeus ruling over Pisces, Zeus ruling over Sag, and then Kronos ruling over Capricorn and Aquarius. So literally you have the 7 archons here. You realize that from a Gnostic perspective, you have the 7 archons. You have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Traditionally, through astrology, through astronomy, you have the archons ruling the zodiac wheel. I find this absolutely mind-blowing. It's just absolutely mind-blowing. And then we can get into some theology to put this into perspective. And is this how it works? I think so. So let me narrate this for you. See, the Yod-Heh-Vah-Heh, which obviously in Christianity, in Judaism, in Protestant, in these religions, in the Abrahamic religions, it's the Yod. The Yod-Heh-Vah-Heh coming on the scene. And just where did the Yod-Heh-Vah-Heh come on the scene? Well, you could postulate that the Yod came on the scene during the Age of Taurus, because it was the late Bronze Age. We know we can go to the Mesha Stele or the Stele, and we know that it's mentioned there. But we can't go beyond that. And you see, ladies and gentlemen, when Moses comes down from Mount Sinai to give the 10 commandments to the Israelites, he finds them worshiping the golden calf, which is right here, the bull. Because see, the age of Aries was coming into play. And literally, you would have Moses and the Israelites being right there on the precipice of moving into Aries. That's why in Hebrew, they blow the shofar, the ram's horn. And is this why? Is this the reason why iron and the Yod are a match? Let me back this up again, ladies and gentlemen. See, the Yod-Heh-Vah-Heh has a numerology from the original Hebrew of 26, and the element that Mars is tied to is iron. Now remember, the Yod-Heh-Vah-Heh is a god of war. There's a ton of killing and bloodshed in the Old Testament. Yeah, there's a lot of love and there's a lot of, but there's a lot of worship me or I'll kill you. You better do what I say. You better do this blood smear and you better circumcise your children. And there's slavery in the Old Testament. There's a lot of nasty stuff going on in the Old Testament. A lot of killing, a lot of genocide. The walls of Jericho, Joshua being a killer. Well, again, ladies and gentlemen, the reason why Moses smashed the 10 commandments, because he went up to Mount Sinai to get the 10 commandments. He comes down, they're still worshiping the bull because we're still in Taurus. Taurus is Venus, Aphrodite, Inanna. But they're like, hey man, we're now in Aries. You can't be doing that anymore. And that's why they blow the ram's horn. Aries, Mars. And that's, when we go and we turn this back a little bit, there may be, and this is not even verifiable. The Yod-Heh-Vah-Heh really comes on the scene during the age of Aries, folks. We could say that there's a possibility that the Yod-Heh-Vah-Heh came on the scene at the late stages of Taurus, literally where they're switching hands over to the age of Aries. And traditionally in Scorpio, Mars rules Scorpio. So if the Yod-Heh-Vah-Heh really truly is, and I've been all over the place with this, trying to figure out who the Yod is, but doesn't it make sense that the Yod is tied to Mars? Because Mars is the god of war and all this bloodshed and killing and genocides, and it makes so much more sense that the Yod is tied to Mars. In Deuteronomy 32 verses 9, this is the scripture, and maybe you didn't know this, but this is where the Yod gets his inheritance, and the inheritance, his portion, is the nation of Israel. Jacob turns into the nation of Israel. If you've heard this word Jacob ends up turning into the nation of Israel. And in Israel, they have what's called the Iron Dome, which is a war system. It's an Aries-based Mars system because it takes out missiles, killing, destruction. So we could postulate that the Yod came on the scene at the very end of Taurus. That would make sense because traditionally back then there was no Pluto and Mars rules Scorpio back then, and you have this axis right here. And then when you move into the Aries section here, blowing that ram's horn, the Yod officially comes on the scene. But on the back end here, you have this Venus energy. So this is where perhaps you get the Yod-Heh-Vah-Heh being a god of justice, because that's what it alludes to. And this is why people justify all the killings and genocides. I don't. I think that if any of you were instructed to go kill somebody as they were in the Bible, you would say, I'm not doing that. Again, these are allegorical. Were they real stories? Don't know. We know they're allegorical, though, but it doesn't matter because the stories people think are real. And this is how magic works. So personally for me, this is when the Yod-Heh-Vah-Heh comes on the scene. Officially. During the age of Aries, the Israelites, they blow the ram's horn. They're not worshiping the golden calf. They're doing the iron. This is where iron and the blood smear over the doorways. All this bloodshed. Iron, Mars, war. Aries. This is why Moses smashes the 10 commandments, because they're worshiping the golden calf. They're still doing the Torah stuff. Pretty easy to see this. So if you didn't know that the Yod was assigned, the Yahweh's portion was the Israelites, and that's why they have the ram's horn right here. So there's a very good chance, there's a very good possibility that the Yod-Heh-Vah-Heh, the God of the Bible, is Mars. And that's it. But I'll leave that up to you. This is the left-hand path, by the way. The left-hand path. So if we go all the way back to the age of Gemini, if we go back to the astrological age of Gemini, perhaps we'd be going back to ancient Egypt. I would think maybe the upper and lower Egypt would represent the twins of Gemini, but that's speculation. But there is no record. If you go back, there is absolutely no record of the Yod during the age of Gemini. Zero record of it. There is only a record coming in, perhaps right here, which again, Scorpio forming that symbiotic relationship with Taurus. But definitely right here. If we go back up here, these. And is this Adam and Eve? Masculine and feminine. The story of Adam and Eve, ladies and gentlemen, is masculine and feminine, and we have it here, masculine and feminine. The Israelites worshiping the golden calf, and then we have it clearly here, officially when they're blowing the ram's horn. But nothing during the age of Gemini. The records are slim pickings, and I like Jason Bashir has much more information than I do on the historicity of things. This is not my forte. I can only go back and read, and then I'm just regurgitating. And we know, folks, that the challenging thing we have about history is there's Trojan horses in history. Not all history is, you could say, accurate. So what can we really trust from history? It's tough. It's tough because you're going on the say-so of documents that you read and you think they're legit, and we know that people can easily put Trojan horses in what we would call legitimate historical evidences. So there's no record of this right here, but this is definitely right here. This would be a right and left-hand path because Gemini is ruled by Mercury, and Venus, and Zeus is the right-hand path. We have the left and right-hand path right here. And then we get the left-hand path. This right here is what all of us were born into. I would imagine everybody listening to this presentation, you were born during the age of Pisces. And I've included Poseidon in here, which is the brother of Zeus. But traditionally, it's just Zeus. Poseidon has the great dark spot on it. Jupiter has the great red spot on it. And they form a symbiotic relationship with the age of Virgo, with the sign of Virgo, and Mercury. And Mercury is in the tree of life, the left-hand path. And is this why the path of sin is where Jesus comes on the scene to take your sins away? Because clearly Jesus was born of a virgin. And clearly Jesus was a fisher of men. And clearly Poseidon is the god of water. And clearly Venus is right below Zeus. The question is, where does Neptune sit? I think the Golden Dawn has him sitting here in Keter. But this is debatable. Completely debatable. But this perhaps is the reason why this was all about the church, salvation, them getting the energy, because you're doing these rituals, you're doing these baptisms, you're doing these confessions, because you're on the left-hand path, the path of sin here. Even though traditionally Zeus ruled Pisces and that's the right-hand path. It's usually always this yin-yang aspect, but is this the ruler? Is this the boss of the age that we live in? These are all questions that I have and kind of play around with. So to finish this presentation up, we look to obviously where we're at right now. Where are we going? Well, seemingly we've moved into the age of Aquarius. And we could easily put Kronos there. And Kronos on the tree of life is Bina, which is a left-hand path. But where would Uranus sit? Well, this is debatable, but Chokma or Chokma, the right-hand path. Uranus is the OG. Uranus is the one that created all the other ones from the Greek mythologies. What path is this? Is this going to be if Uranus sits here, this is the right-hand path. Is this going to be a right-hand path astrological age? Or do we just say that it's a right-hand path merged with the middle path, if you want to say this is the middle path? The sun just, kind of like taking on the energy of the boss. Which path is this? Well, you look at the yugas. What yuga are we in? Was this age right here the last? Was this the Kali Yuga stage? Or are we still in it? And we'll have to go through it during the age of Aquarius. Time will tell. And again, this is debatable, right? But this is the right-hand path. I'm just regurgitating this, by the way, Uranus being in this Sephiroth. But this is debatable. But keep in mind that this is the path of Inanna, Zeus, and potentially, if this is true, Uranus. Uranus, Jupiter, Venus. And then we have the sun and the moon down to Malkuth. So is this age where we remove the left-hand path? And is this where the Bible theology talks about Satan being removed from this system? Is that allegorically what it meant? Well, the tree of life and stuff like that, if Uranus really is here, right above Inanna, and the sun obviously is the life giver, well, that makes it kind of a neutral. But these form the right-hand path. Are we going to just move completely into a right-hand path? The age of Aquarius, if you put the tarot card here, it's the card of justice. Leo is the card of the Hierophant. Time will tell. But I think it's very interesting connections to consider and take a look at. So there you go, ladies and gentlemen. Inanna, Queen of Heaven, Decoded. I hope you enjoyed this one. Kind of went off topic a little bit, but couldn't help myself. Just followed the trail. And I wanted to present it as it was given to me. So listen, I appreciate each and every one of you. If you saw something, leave a comment. Would love to hear from you. That's all I got for today. My name is Logan for Decode Your Reality. Until next time, we will see you later.